This is Gemara Baba Basra Daf Sadi Tes, learning of this month, the month of Elul, as we march towards the Yom HaKadosh Rosh Hashanah, has been generously sponsored by a close friend of the Daf, as the Schos Aliyas Neshama of Aster Rizal Basra Meir, Psiyata Dishmaya, learning in days as we prepare for Rosh Hashanah, should bring Aster Rizal Basra Meir to higher and higher place in Gan Eden Shalmayla, closer to the Kisei HaKavod B'siyata Dishmaya. We are holding on Sadi Chesam and Beis. We are 4 lines from the bottom. Once we started talking about the Beis HaMikdash, we dive a little bit deeper. Rav Chanina Nafach L'Kraisa. Rav Chanina went out to a village, Ramalei Karai, and some of the people there asked him a stira between some psukim adadi on each other. It says the house that Shlomo Melech built was 60 amos long by 20 amos wide, and 30 amos tall. But on the other hand, it says the room lifnei advir inside the partition was 20 amos oirech long. Ve'esr mama rachav and 20 amos wide. Ve'esr mama kaimasai and 20 amos tall. So the question is, the first pasuk says it was 30 amos tall. Second pasuk says it was only 20 amos tall. So Amar Lahu Rav Chanina responds, Kika chashim misfas kruvim l'malo. The second pasuk, which is talking about the height of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, says it's 20 amos wide because it's going from the edge of the keruvim and upward. Says the Gemara, my kamashon, there must be a reason why the pasuk would talk that way, why the Torah would discuss the height based on just from the top of the keruvim. Says the Gemara, you know what it teaches us? It does teach us something important. Hakamash the mata kilamala teaches us that 10 amos below the keruvim were similar to the 20 amos above the keruvim. What does that mean? Mala ein mishamesh klum. Just like the 20 amos above the keruvim, it was airspace, it was empty. Aflamata, so to the 20 amos below the 10 amos below the keruvim, ein mishalim klum, they were empty. They served no purpose. As the Gemara is going to explain, the reason being is that the keruvim were benes, that they didn't actually take up any space. So we introduced that by explaining that the area on top of the keruvim was empty, airspace. So too, the area underneath was just airspace. What does that mean? It was just airspace. The keruvim were there. The aron was there. We'll see in a moment. Says the Gemara, Messiah, Alele Rav Levi, this is a riot. Rav Levi, Dam Rav Levi, Tim Rav Yechon, Davar Dam Messiah, Biyadinu to Messiah, I say no. Makamara Nekuvim Ein Min Amida took up no space. The Gemara proves this further. Tanya Nami Hachi Aaron Shazam Maisha Yishle Revach Esra Amos Tamos Wai L'Chol Ruach V'Ruach on each and every side. There were 10 amos miraculously between the aron and the sides of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, even though such would not actually fit, as the entire Kodesh HaKadoshim was 20 amos by 20 amos. So if there's 10 amos in either side, that's full 20 amos. That means there's nothing in the middle. But there was the aron and the kruvim, Einoi min hamida. Amar Rav Noi continues the Gemara, Amar Shmuel, 3 lines on the wide lines. Kruvim b'nei seinayin, then the kruvim were there b'nei shenamar v'chamish amos kenava kruvim achas. 5 amos of one of the kruvim, v'chamish amos kenava kruv hashenis of the second kruv. Eser amos. Mixois, the top of his wings were 10 amos from the edge. Eser amos mixois kenavav adiksos kenavav. It was 10 amos from one wing to the next. So the wingspan was 10 amos, not including the kruvim themselves. And they were side by side. So that means the wingspan was 20 amos. So if that is the case, that the wingspan is 20 amos, so now that basically should be taking up the entirety of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So ask the Gemara, if that's true, then how is it where are the kruvim themselves? Seemingly there's no space for them. If they are 20 amos wide from wing to wing, then there should be no area for the kruvim themselves to stand. Ela Shma Mina, the end of the first white line, B'neis Hein Aimdim, it was in Neis that they were standing. Says the Gemara, Maskiv La Abaya V'Dilma Bolton Kitar Negoylin Have. Ask Abaya, wait, maybe they were protruding from the center of the backs like chickens, that the wings come straight from the center of the back and then go around. And therefore, it's not an ace at all. Therefore, it makes sense that it's 20 amos, and their bodies don't take up space because the wings are coming from the center of their back. Maskiv law, that's question number one. Maskiv la Rava, asks Rava, maybe they were not directly opposite one another. Maybe there was an overlap of the two wings, meaning if the two wings went side by side, then you're right, 20 amos fills up the whole Kodesh HaKodashim. Maybe there was an overlap. Second kasha. Third kasha. Maslar Rav Achabar Yaakov in the fourth wide line. Maybe the Kruvim were on a diagonal, not side by side of the Kodesh HaKodashim, which thereby the diagonal of a 20 by 20 square is larger than 20 amos, and therefore gives extra space. Fourth question. Maybe the Kodesh got wider at the top, meaning we know the dimensions of the Beis HaMikdash, the Kodesh HaKodashim, was 20 by 20, but maybe that's on the bottom. But maybe we got wider on the top, and therefore allowed more space for the Kruvim. Maskler Apapa, fifth kasha. But then make of Avikaifi Yodayu. Maybe the wings were a little bit bent. So therefore, again, only if it's 10 amos straight out. But if they're bent, it doesn't take up the full airspace. Maskvla Ravashi, six kasha. Maybe the wings were crossed, so they didn't fill up again the whole airspace of the Kodesh HaKodashim. So six kashas, and the Gemara is asking, why are we assuming that it was B'neis? Maybe there are other ways to figure out the dimensions that the Kruvim indeed were able to stand. So says the Gemara doesn't really answer any of these kashas, but rather the Gemara continues by saying, Keitzad hein aimdim. Lamaisa, we quote a braiso which discusses the direction of the Kruvim. Face to face, the face were towards the Beis HaMikdash. The pasuk seemingly indicates that they were facing towards the Beis HaMikdash. Says it depends. If Klal Yisrael is doing Hashem's will, then they face each other. If not, they face outward. And a similar kash, what does he do with the pasuk b'nei Mishalachiv? Says the Gemara, Astude, they were angled, so even though they're faced outward, they were still able to glance and see each other. Titania, as we see in our Bryce, Uncles Ager Oimer teaches Uncles Kruvim Maisei Tzatzuim Heim. The Kruvim were an act of Tzatzuim, children, Umitsudadin Peneim, and their faces were angled. Kitalmud Anifta Mirabbi, like a Talmud leaves from his Rebbe. You don't just walk out, you walk back at an angle and you sort of keep on looking towards the Rebbe, and that is the way the Kruvim were stationed, and that is a few details of the incredible Kruvim, the Nes, that they took up no airspace, etc. Says the Gemara, the Mishnah, on the bottom of the Amud. If someone has a bar, a well, a cistern, inside the property, the house of his friend, you're allowed to enter into your friend's house to go to your bar at a time that people generally enter, and you leave, and a time when people leave, which is, of course, only by day. Can't go in the middle of the night. You're not allowed to bring your animal into his house to drink from the bar. Ella, what do? You fill up a jug and then you brought it outside with it. And the owner makes himself a lock, and the homeowner makes himself a lock, and each one has his rights covered to make sure that it can't be utilized in an incorrect fashion by the other, which again, the Gemara will explain in a few moments. Says the Gemara, what is this lock for? Where's it placed? Amar Yechanan, Shneim Labar. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Last line. The Balabar wants to guard his pit and no one drinks from his water. What does Balabayis need a lock on top of the well of the Balabar for? So Amar Avalazar, as we turn over to Sadi Tesam and Beis, Misham Chshad Ishtoy. A very simple reasoning. He doesn't want anyone to suspect that this guy coming into his house is potentially, there's some level of illegal activity between this guy coming in and his wife. And therefore, for that, he goes and he puts a lock on the well to ensure that no one thinks that there's anything inappropriate happening between the two of them. Says the Gemara. And we continue with another Mishnah. If someone has a garden behind the garden of his friend, so I have to go through your garden to get to the other garden. So when are you allowed to enter through the other person's garden to get to your garden? At the normal times. And you're not allowed to bring tagarim, merchants into the garden to buy the vegetables. And you can't use this field to get to another field. In the outside guy, he plants the road. If he plants the road that you normally walk on, he'll allow you to walk on a path through the side. One more time. And the outer garden plants the path. It says the Mishnah, however, if Bezdin allowed him to walk through a side path, they mutually agreed, then it's a little bit different. Meaning, if you're going through his actual field, that's the aforementioned halachas. But if not, and rather you're going to a side path, then you can come and go as you please. You let to bring in merchants, but you can't go into another field still. And then no one plants that path. Says the Gemara. What about Amar Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel? 3 lines from the white lines. Someone says, I'm selling you an amma, a water canal. The buyer is given 2 ammas of land for the actual water canal. V'ama mikan, and 1 amma on either side for the water banks. Lagtfei for the banks. If someone is buying a canal to supply water, different water supplies require different space. Lagpay for the banks. Says the Gemara, these banks on the side, who plants them? Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel, Bal Hasada Zer, Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, Bal Hasada Noitam. So Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel says, owner of the field plants them. Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel says, the owner of the field plants them with trees. Mandamar Zaira, according to the first mandamar that says that you plant them kol shkei noitam. Certainly, you can put the trees there. Why? Because the seeds will go into and ruin the banks of the water canal and cause it to collapse. And we conclude, Amar Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel, teaches Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel, Amas hamayim shekalu agpei metaknei meisa sadeh. The Amas hamayim that the banks collapse, the owner of the canal can repair it using oisa sadeh, the soil, the dirt from that field. Biyadua shalai kalu agpei. What's the reason? Because we know that the banks, like where do the banks go? So use that dirt to rebuild the banks of the canal. So but let the owner of the field go tell him, go fly a kite. It was your water. Meyecha caused it. So why are you using my dirt? You know why? Because this was the reason when you gave it to him, when he bought it. This was you accepted originally. I'll pick it up from the Mishnah. B'siyata Dishmaya.